We spend a lot of time talking about inventory. We spend a lot of time gathering inventory data from you. Frankly, it's a pain in the ass for both of us. It adds a lot of work. It's not easy and it makes life difficult. And what I'd like to get into in the next couple of webinars is why we do that and why it's important. There are some very critical reasons, and these fortunately dovetail with probably the most common questions we get about our financial reports, which are all about the gross product and why is the gross product so important. So with that, I've got a couple of PowerPoint slides I want to walk through. Like I say, please feel free to interrupt me as we go. It is not rude. That will make it much easier to have a discussion. And hopefully here you're going to be able to see, there's a way to put it into presentation mode. I'm not remembering what that is. Sorry. Here we go. Perfect. All right. Can you see slides?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Also, this webinar is going to be a little different than past ones. I hope you have a piece of paper and a pencil because I want you to, hang on one sec. I want you to do a little math as we're going. I'm going to do this one more time. Share my screen. Share screen. All right. Can you see a PowerPoint presentation, or do you see a PowerPoint plus the next slide?
Just the one slide.
Just the one. All right. Perfect. Great. Here's where we're going to start. I want to know from you, what business do you want to own? This is the information you are given. These are A through F are different businesses. They purchase a product and they sell a product. So think of this like a microwave store. You buy microwaves, you sell microwaves. I want some volunteers for how would you rank these businesses? Does everybody understand the challenge?
Yep.
All right. So please feel free. I'll give you a second. I was going to record a little Jeopardy music here to go with this interlude. When you get a chance, tell me what your top choice business is. Which business? It's what now?
D.
D? All right. Why? And you don't have to sound smart here. I get it. Some of these are going to be pretty basic. It's all right.
More sales than
Purchased
purchases.
100,000. Yeah, go ahead.
Hit it.
More sales than purchases.
Love it. Ryan, that's what you were going to say?
Yep.
Okay. And the worst one, please.
B.
B. Awesome.
E.
All right. Good. Okay, so that's perfect. Now, this is, if you look at someone's tax form, this is largely what you see. Okay? You see purchases, money in, and money out. Now, this is the total. So if you picked D as your favorite business and some probably E or B as your least favorite, that would be okay. There are a bunch of them that are just marginal relative to that. Everybody understand that? Check. All right, good. Pretty easy. Now, I'm going to ask the same question, same companies. We've added a little bit of information. Which business do you want to own now? These are also A through F. Do you think your answer is going to change?
Yes.
Yep.
E.
I meant to leave the letters on both of them. E? Yeah, E looks pretty good. Why?
E.
Why is E the best business?
Your inventory grew by basically $1 million or $1.1 million.
And you had some sales in there even
Yep.
too. Okay.
Yep.
So if we rank these now, we've got E. If I've done my addition correctly, you bought $1 million worth of inventory. You sold, or you started with 100,000. You sold 100,000. You ended with 1.2 million. You have this total line. What do we know this line as?
Gross profit.
That's exactly right. That total of those is the gross product. Okay. Now I'm going to argue that I like F better than E, but I'll take E. If somebody wants to give me $200,000, I'm probably going to be okay with it. What's the other reason? If you were going to buy this business right at the close of the year, which is when we did this report, what would be the other great thing about buying this business? E or F, as opposed to C or A?
It has inventory that could potentially be sold.
Bingo. You actually have stuff. The problem with the business of A is you start at zero, you end at zero, right? There's no replacement. You don't have anything to sell. You start flat-footed every time. This is a seasonal stocker operation a lot of years, right? The problem with business B is you've definitely had an inventory growth, but you literally had no cash flow in the current year, right? At least in business A, you had cash flow. Business B, you didn't have any cash flow. Business C, you started with some inventory. You created some income. You bought it back, right? And then you didn't do a very good job marketing. And then if we skip forward to F, you started with inventory. You ended with a lot of inventory, and you got a few sales in the middle to generate cash flow. Does that make sense? All right, there are two parts of gross product that are very important, and we're going to get to those in just a minute. As I mentioned, we spend a fair amount of time talking about inventory. It takes a lot of effort on our part to get it into your financials, and it takes a lot of effort on your part to get it to us so that we can do that. Inventory is not only a massive store of value in our business, it is also the single biggest predictor of future revenue. It is a leading indicator for what is about to happen in the future. When we sell out of all of our inventory, we are, effectively out of business for the time being, right? So again, if I'm going to run stockers 5 months of the year, I'm going to buy them all in April or May, and I'm going to sell them all in September, right? I begin at zero and I end at zero. And if I'm in one of the beauties of being in the cow-calf business is I can be in business and generate cash flow while growing my asset value or my inventory value. Any questions about that? We're a quiet bunch today. All right. The trading account is taught by Ranching for Profit. Includes a couple of things that I did not include on the first couple of slides. The first things are always the same things that show up on the tax forms: sales or revenue and purchases. If you're in the stocker business, this is cost of goods sold. If you're in the cow-calf business, this can be, any number of things, but basically an asset purchase. We also use a closing inventory, and we use an opening inventory. The pluses and minuses are effectively how you sum these together. So we start with our closing inventory, we add our sales, our transfers out, we subtract our transfers in. Those are very similar to a purchase or a cost. And then we have actual purchases, and then we have opening inventory. And when we add that column of numbers together, we get the gross product. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, good.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
We have two Keans here. We do. Look at that.
I need to
Oh, no.
lose a little weight, but maybe not that much.
Huh. I gotcha. I see now your dad now. I just can see his ear. I gotcha.
Oh,
You're both logged in as Kian, or you're both logged in as Holzer. I see. All right. So there's a clear purpose for the trading account. And that is not to predict the amount of cash that is in your bank account. It is strictly a measure of the economic value of your production. And importantly, that is not always converted to cash. And we're going to talk about situations where that is and is not converted to cash. It is possible to generate more cash than gross product. It is possible, it's much more commonly possible to generate a lot less cash than gross product. Importantly, you are the one that chooses whether or not you convert your economic production into financial performance or cash, right? And that is often in our business the result of action or inaction. When we talk about inventory, one of the things that we are trying to do is not just ride the market, but what sell-by marketers like Wally and Doug and Bud Williams have taught us is we're trying to capture appreciation and reconvert it back into undervalued inventory. This is a very important concept that I don't feel like we can cover enough. Volatility is both a give and take thing. We have been, some of us that are in the cow business, especially if you're in stockers, have seen it, or cow-calf, have seen a pretty good run up in prices over the course of this year. If you don't choose to sell anything and you wait long enough, prices will go back down. That value wouldn't be captured. If prices go up and then you sell what you have and buy something undervalued back, you have the opportunity to capture that appreciation. When we deal with what we call a mark-to-market, or when we change our inventory valuation, we usually, unless you're in the real estate business, we do not change the value of things like real estate assets. We use the original purchase price for your real estate, even though that number also does go up and down. The difference is most of us are not counting on capturing the value increase or decrease in our real estate. Most of us are we're not in the real estate business per se. We're in the cow-calf or the stocker or the sheep business. We're in the livestock business, okay? And so we track that livestock change in value carefully, because when we know what the changes in values are, it gives us a real opportunity to try to capture the value. I get very concerned, and you thinking back to some of those examples in their ranches A through F, I get very concerned when people want to sell and not replace. We've talked about this a number of times in these webinars. The profit comes from selling with replacement, okay? And when we talk about our gross product, it is possible to sell everything and capture cash, and that's fantastic. And sometimes that is the best opportunity. And it also depends on where you're at in your career. Most of you that I'm looking at are reasonably young. If you are in your 70s and want to get out of business, then capturing cash at the highest possible point of the market is an ideal strategy. But if you're younger and are trying to build a business, or even if you're older and trying to build a business, you want to capture that high valued, capture the excess, if you will, in those high valued animals and replace it with undervalued animals or an undervalued asset of some type. All right. When we look at trading accounts in our financials, we use a slightly different system than what we often put out in sort of our PR materials, and slightly different than what Ranching for Profit uses. The straight system uses a beginning inventory and an ending inventory. Turns out Chelsea Waters was right many years ago. We're much better off, and it makes our lives much better and easier if we combine those two numbers. So we often refer to that as a mark-to-market or an inventory value change. You'll notice I'm using two different accounts here, but don't pay attention to the numbers specifically. But we take those two lines. So imagine if we were to do this in this account, we would take negative 574,500, add 532,500 to it, and come up with a number that's about $42,000 as the difference. And that would be entered as this beginning ending inventory change line. One of the reasons these have asterisks by them, we put that in so that your tax preparer will ignore it. This has no impact on tax. When we prepare a tax return, we only use these lines. And again, depending if you're in the stocker business or the cow-calf business, those lines might be used differently. But that's the basics of it. When we look at these lines here, which give us a measure of economic performance, those are completely left out of our taxes. One thing I want you to know for reference, this number is the change during whatever period we're looking at. This could be a month, it could be a quarter, it could be a year. What this number right here means is that in this enterprise, our inventory value in this enterprise went up by $165,900. Does everybody understand that? So
Yeah.
this is a year period that we're looking at. Now this is only the dollar value change. This does not include, or this could include, changes in number of animals and changes in the value of those animals. So we might have bought, 100 300-pound calves and they went up in value because they gained weight or they changed, maybe you bought 100 300-pound bulls, castrated them and put 500 pounds on. Or this is, we grew our cow herd by, 100 cows and we paid $1,600 for them. Does that kind of make sense? All right, great. Same on this enterprise, right? This enterprise decreased the value of its inventory, either because of markets or because of number, but the value of the inventory went down by $98,850. Now, sadly, I didn't choose the best example here, but when we go, this is a little clip out of the balance sheet of the same account. And basically what you see is that this is the opening value. So this is December 31 of the prior year. This is December 31st it'd be 23, but the end of the year. So these are a year apart. This would be your opening inventory. This would be your closing inventory. If we had a feed class in this one, the feed inventory the change number would be 29,800. If we take our stocker cattle numbers, there's a bit of a mix here in the classes, so you'll have to trust me that these add up correctly. But you'll notice in breeding livestock, there's about $150,000, $160,000 change there. And then there is about a $400,000 change in the stocker cattle. And that has a lot to do with some of these are replacements and some of them are breeding assets and that sort of thing. So the one piece of clarity that we lose just a little bit when we don't have the beginning inventory, we have a bit of a hard time dividing our gross product by our beginning inventory. It means we have to look at the balance sheet in order to do that. We try to break the balance sheet out so that we can do this easily by class with each asset class on the balance sheet. We're going to get more into that later, and frankly, we're going to talk more about that next time. Now, I want to jump in for just a minute. We're going to take a little tangent. So before I do that, any questions on what we've talked about so far?
Nope.
Love it. Okay, so now we're going to take a bit of a tangent. We're going to go into gross margin. Gross margin, which is referred to as gross profit in accounting software, is the gross product, which, if you recall, is the sum of your trading account minus the direct costs. And direct costs in accounting software are often called costs of goods sold. Okay, so the gross margin would be the sum, if you will, of the gross product minus the cost of goods sold. So that gives us different gross margins. These are all different enterprises. And I've taken the name of the enterprise out kind of to anonymize the data. I think most of you are familiar with this. We have the same things in the trading account. We have our beginning ending change number. We don't have any transfers, and then we have purchases and revenue. Oftentimes we look at a number called the gross margin percent or the gross margin ratio. And what we're doing there is we're taking the gross product and dividing it by the gross margin. And I thought I had a slide in there with that. Nope. All right. So we take in each of these enterprises, I would like you to tell me which is the most efficient enterprise. And these are A through, we'll just do A through D. And maybe calculate the ratio for each of those. All right, first, before we say which one you like the best, tell me how you did the calculation. What are we doing? Any volunteers? Am I gonna have to call on somebody? Ricky, you've got a calculator with you, right?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. How are you doing the math?
Take your gross profit divided by your gross product or your total trading account.
Perfect. And what did you come up with as the best one? What's your favorite?
Well, I haven't worked through them all, but maybe CD. You're not figuring E, the $1,500 column?
No, I just did the first four, but you could do D or E. It is rare. We the negative 25,000 kind of screws things up a little bit. A
Oh.
negative cost of goods sold is slightly problematic, but
I didn't see that.
what do you like in the first four? Show of hands. Let's do a vote. Who likes the first one? Column A. Who likes the second one? Column B. Nobody? Hang on, I'm not seeing all of you at one time. There we go. That's
Gross product.
so if you do, what do you get if you divide the gross profit by the gross product? What do you get for that? Did anybody do the math?
101%, isn't it?
Well, we do it the other way. So 64 divided by 65, it should be just slightly less than 1.
Yeah, that one's like 98%.
Yeah. Okay. What did you get for Enterprise C?
78.
78. Good.
78%.
And what'd you get for Enterprise D?
96 or 97.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask again, what's your favorite? This one's negative, so we're going to assume that that's not it, right? This is a bad one. And I want to make sure when you do this calculation, there are times when you have two negatives. Two negatives don't make a positive on the income side, okay? The two negatives are always bad. So never lead yourself astray with that. Would you prefer this 98% gross margin or you said 78 and then something also very high? Which of those three do you like the best?
B or D are both pretty much equal.
Okay.
Mhm.
Anybody else?
Well, given the same percentages for B and D, I think I like D because the number's bigger.
As to the volume, yeah, good. I pay my mortgage on dollars, not just percent, but yes, that's fair. What else? How about between D and E? Is there much difference there?
Mhm.
Still pretty good. We don't know what, I didn't give you what the actual inventory is, if it's 0 or if it just didn't change, but again, a fairly efficient enterprise, right? All right, now here's where we get to a perception thing. We often look at we often look at enterprises that have a bad gross margin ratio, and most of us go straight to the direct costs and look at that. And that is a great place to look, good place to start. But if you've been doing this for a little while and have your operations situated so that your direct costs are reasonably under control, so I'll just, pick on Southern Wyoming. If you live in Southern Wyoming and feed for 6 months of the year, you might have a direct cost problem. If you live in Sam's part of the world, or where he's in Tennessee with fescue, if you live, who else is from the South here? Cole, you're down in Louisiana, right? So if you're in that part of the world, you probably don't have a big winter feed problem. But for many of us, once we've gotten sort of the basic control over our costs, we really need to start looking at our gross product. Okay. When we look at that ratio, there are two sides of it, right? One is the denominator, one's the numerator. We can be bad in either one. The usual first cut focus is look at direct costs, but I will challenge most of us that I run into too many people in our world that we are too cost focused. We don't spend enough time figuring out how to generate more income. And if we do spend more time thinking about how to generate more income, it's often with costs that come with it, right? If we're going to generate more income, it's because we're going to put in more feed, we're going to put in more fertilizer, we're going to put in more, and that's not the kind of increasing our income we're talking about. We want to look at ways to, how do we increase return with either very low or no inputs, mostly through applying what we know. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. There's a limit to how much you can cut before you, right? There is no limit to the upside. And we can all like, well, yeah, but it's not ever going to go, well, maybe. But I continue to see people that impress me with a new high of how much I think they can produce from what they're, from their activity. Okay, so when we think about the upside, that is a place where there is no limit. You could cut your direct cost down to zero. That's the end. Long before you hit zero, you're probably going to encounter problems. Yes, Bubba. Where your gross product suffers because you're trying to manage the gross margin ratio. So my next question for you is what are reasons that your gross product could be bad?
Poor marketing.
Okay. Yes. What else?
Death loss in a stalker operation.
Death loss can totally do it. Yes. Bad animal performance. Can we call that an extreme example of poor animal performance? Is that fair? Okay. Good. What else?
Poor pregnancy rates.
Poor preg rate. Yep. Who said that?
Caleb.
Oh, hey, Caleb. What else? All right, I've got a short list that we'll go to. We touched on a few. Animal performance, which is going to include mortality, preg rate, even growth, right? Average daily gain can affect that. All other things being equal, if we're on grass and no additional costs are being incurred, right? A calf gaining 2 pounds a day is going to produce more than a calf gaining 1 pound a day. Markets can provide a poor gross product, because if the market is declining, right, that means your inventory value is going down, right? And again, all other variables being equal, that will push your gross margin down. Conversely, we've seen a bunch of people where, all other things being equal, the market has gone up. They've kept relatively the same system and they've seen their gross margin increase. Okay. Some of what we want to do is detrend that a little bit for market, but we'll talk about that more another time. We also can have an overvalued inventory, right? If take 2015, you go and buy a bunch of $3,000 heifers. You then spend the next few years raising $500, $600 heifers out of them, right? That can be a real problem. High replacement cost or high cow turnover can be a big problem. If it costs you a lot to get a new cow, you know, up pregnant and going in your system, that can be a big one. I am missing one off this list that there's a whole nother part of this pie that I really want somebody to guess.
John, is this where, like, not understanding your margin calculators and enterprise evaluators, would it fit in this category?
It can.
And
Yeah, literally.
mispricing?
Yeah, and that's actually not the one I was going for, Stan, but that's another really good one to add to this list is literally just management in the business can cause, right? Choosing to put your assets and your money into the wrong enterprise. Very, very good. And any kind of mismatch between the enterprise and the landscape. Okay, the big one that jumps out at me always, and usually one of the first questions I ask if I see a bad gross product is I ask about grazing. Right? Fastest way to double your production or to increase your gross product is to manage your grazing differently. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you are a bad grass manager and you are running at 1/3 of your capacity, your gross product's going to be low. If you're a great grass manager and you're managing up, let's say at 80% of capacity, right? But with plenty of residual to keep you sort of going, then you often will have a consistently high gross product. Now, you can undo all of that with bad animal performance. You can undo all of it with bad marketing. You can undo all of it with bad asset allocation, okay? But again, those are places where we are often optimizing between multiple things. Sam, if I can pick on you for a minute, you are living in like 5 acre per animal unit type country and trying to get to 3. Was that right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be less. I mean, it's supposed to be 2 to 3.
Supposed to be 2 to 3. Okay. Where Kian lives, for example, how many acres does it take to get to an animal unit?
It's probably 25 to 30.
Okay. When parts of southern Wyoming, south of Rawlins, we were at 100 plus. Okay, so those types of things make a difference. Now, if I'm at, what'd you say, Kian, 20 to 30?
Yeah, give or take.
If you can get that, let's say you start at 20 and can get it to 30, that is, again, all other things being equal, that is going to have a significant impact on your gross product. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, you have just taken all of the same resources and produced more. Similarly, if you get animal performance, if you can get your preg rate higher, if you can get your rate of gain higher, that often adds to your gross product. Now, if you have to add a lot of cost, direct cost to get your average daily gain up, then of course that has the potential to undo it. But again, I feel like I see way too many places where people are foregoing additional cost where they would receive multiples on additional income. Okay, we can winter cows super cheaply. That's awesome. That doesn't always produce the best result because oftentimes we are trying to optimize. So if I go to, these 1 million pound per acre grazing systems where I'm moving them 10 times a day and, I've got an H2A guy out there with them constantly and bat latches going off every hour, there is a very good chance that my animal performance is suffering. I don't see places where they're running that high intensity where they are getting good animal performance. Not saying they don't exist. I haven't seen many of them. Conversely, we spend a lot of time focusing on grass management because it's very important. In an article that Dave Pratt wrote in the early 2000s, he talked about he made a list of the things that have the most impact on becoming a profitable ranch. Much to my dismay, stockmanship was not on the list at all. Grass management was very high on the list. I think there's an interaction between the two. We can debate that, but he had data at that time to kind of show that. Grass management is a big lever in your system and in your gross product. And I think that gross product ultimately is the biggest lever that we have. Okay, we can cut costs, and that's good. And I believe in low overheads and all that sort of thing. But man, we have a lot of opportunities to really improve our income. And I would prefer most people, after an initial foray into cost cutting and with an eye to sort of checking in fairly regularly, that we get away from cost cutting and we really get to value creation, because that's what often separates very high performing businesses from marginal, from okay ones, right? So being a lot of people in ranching for profit are profitable. That's great, but not many of them are really profitable. And there's kind of a difference there. We want to get, we want to get past the okay level to now let's make this thing really sing. Now, if you're on your way out, you're late in your career, maybe you don't care. Might not be worth it. For a lot of people, I think just getting to profitability is such a change that, they're more than happy just to get to a 2% profit over their opportunity cost. And that is a huge win. But I talk to a lot of young people that really, they want to buy the neighbor's place. And if they're going to do that, they have got to be not just 2% profitable. They've got to be Wally Olson profitable. I use Wally constantly as an example. We have a number of customers. I posted on Facebook about one recently. We've got a few others that are buying neighbors' places. They are paying for real estate with cash generated from livestock production systems. That is not a 2% business, I promise. That has to be a high-performing business. All right, we're going to go on in the future and talk about what do we compare our gross product to. And I'm just going to give you a quick prelude, but basically we compare that gross product to the underlying asset value. How much money does it take to generate what return? I often get asked about targets. So this, for example, what is the gross product of your cow herd divided by the value of your cow herd? So if you have $100,000 in gross product on $1 million cow herd, right, that would be a 10%. We'll call it a turnover number, right? But that number gives you an idea of what the performance of that underlying asset is. We often look, as Stan mentioned, we often look at gross margins as the way to allocate resources. Which enterprise should we be doing more of? Well, one with the greatest gross margin percentage, and then take Kian's adjustment and say, well, look, it's a good gross margin percentage and it's a big dollar amount. That's great. But there's a whole nother thing we ought to be looking at, which is the return from the underlying asset. Okay, what does your cow herd return? What does your lamb, your ewe flock return, that sort of thing. When I get asked about targets for this, they are all over the place. And I will say that can be greater than one. We see plenty of situations where people have a herd valued at $1 million that generates 1.1 million in revenue. And that seems counterintuitive when you think about it, but it is absolutely possible. We see examples of it again and again. I wouldn't say it's common, but it is possible. And again, structuring the enterprises in such a way so that they can do that really helps. The biggest problem I keep coming back to, I've said this a number of times, we often have a lack of income focus. And I'm going to liken this to something that we've talked about a number of times before. You spend a lot of time learning how to be good grass managers. You might even spend a lot of time learning how to be good, geneticists and good cattle breeders and selecting all the right animals. But then we show up on, November 2nd and just dump off our calf crop at the sale barn and go home and hope for the best. We are not income focused. The showing up at the sale barn and dumping the calves off is only a symptom of the problem. It is not the problem. The problem is the lack of income focus. That is something that is incredibly common in our industry. We feel like all of that is out of our control. We can't affect our income. That is not true. I hear all the time, well, I can't control markets. Correct. But I can choose when I take things to the market, right? Now, if I'm feeding fat steers, for example, there's a point where I don't have a choice, right? Once I have a 1,400-pound fat steer, it's time to go. So yes, there is some, there are a few places where we get railroaded a little bit, but generally I have every choice about how I allocate my resources and then how I create income from those resources. If I choose to dump calves off sometime between October 15th and November 15th at the sale barn, I'm not spending any effort marketing. I've spent a lot of effort getting to that point, and then I've kind of dropped off at the end. Over and over again, we see cases where focusing on income produces much better results, right? The grass is greener where you water it. Comes up again and again. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Why not gross margin? I mean, just because you want us to be income focused, why aren't you using margin on top of that underlying asset value?
I'm not sure I understand. Why are we using gross product on the underlying asset value?
Yeah, instead of your gross margin.
Got it. Great question. A few reasons. It actually turns into a more consistent number for us most of the time. And you could use gross margin. I'd like to play with that more. But that, again, it gives there's more direct correspondence between what the underlying asset is and what the revenue from that asset is. I feel like it's a more consistent number. How does that sound? Which may not be the best answer.
I don't know. Just if you're, whatever. If you're trying to figure out return on asset, you got to go another step. But
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that is not a return on asset number, right? It's just it's a measure of asset performance.
Another thing to gauge.
Yeah.
But John, if you're wanting to be income focused, isn't that what this equation then allows you to focus on, even though that's not the entire, I mean, that's not return on your asset. But if we think that income focus is what we're lacking, this then would be the number that
is
would
more
give
direct
us a measurement of that, correct?
Correct. Yeah, again, with the understandings, and Sam, you bring up a good point, because I always look at the gross margin ratios also, like it's easy to take a quick glance, and I look at the underlying asset performance, or the turnover, we'll call it, because I do want to look at those in concert.
Okay.
Because if you look, oh, go ahead, Sam.
Roger, got it.
Okay, go ahead.
Because if you look real quick, John, if you're always looking at gross margin and using that, your mind never completely leaves the cost part of it. And if that's where you continue to stay, hey, I got to cut, you never do get fully income focused if you're using gross margin as your measurement.
That's a better answer than what I said. Perfect, Josh. I love it. Thank you. Now, importantly, again, remember, gross product is not cash. So we could do this with revenue, but there are a lot of cases, and we're going to talk more about these in future webinars, when we are destocking for a drought, when we are restocking after a drought, when we are converting from a cow-calf to a cow-calf stocker business, where we're going to see problems with cash. Cash can be a very volatile metric. I've told most people in here, most of you have heard me talk about the fact that I feel that growing your business is the best tax avoidance strategy there is, or I should say tax reduction strategy. Long term, if you are growing a business, you can compound your returns in that business and be tax sheltered while doing it. So the revenue part of that, we are managing carefully, because we are thinking also very much about how we are investing back in the business, growing our underlying herd, growing our land base, all that sort of thing. Cool. All right. Any other questions or comments? That's a great question, Sam. If you're missing the cartoon, the sidebar is lesson number 10 in living a good life is learn to ask people better questions and give people an opportunity to talk about themselves. That question is not, what the is wrong with you? I've tried that. It doesn't lead to better outcomes, I promise. All right, we're going to do a series of these that are on gross product, because I feel like the more I learn about this, frankly, and the more I do this, this gross product becomes more and more interesting, and there's more and more insight that comes out of it. Most people gloss over it and don't really break it down. As I look at different businesses of different types, that sort of thing, the gross product has an incredible amount of information in it. It's happened a number of times where somebody has a poor gross product or a poor gross margin ratio, and I can look at the feed numbers and say, okay, what's your preg rate? What's your weaning rate? What's your grass management? And they're like, boy, that's funny. You know, we don't have a grass management system. We just turn them out, you know, like, okay, maybe we need to think about that. Or, you know, one of my, one that came up not terribly long ago was, oh yeah, we had a 35% preg rate. Like, yeah, okay. That'd cause a bad gross product. That we are short on leading indicators in our business. And I think looking at your inventory as the biggest predictor of your future income is a great place to be. One of the reasons why I get excited about growing the underlying asset base of the business, the cash flow producing asset base, is because it means we have more income in the future. If we are going to avoid taxes by growing our business, the goal is to make it worse in the future. We want to make that job harder as we go forward while producing more income. That compounding spiral is what gets us to the point where we can afford to buy out our parents, afford to buy out the neighbors, afford to operate at the level we choose to operate at instead of where we're kind of forced into based on some legacy situation or, you know, because of prior economic and financial choices. Awesome. That's all I've got for today. If you guys have questions, I'm more than happy to hang out. We'll do this again in a month, and we're going to talk more about gross product.
So I got a question.
I thank you all for coming. If you need to leave. Yeah, Ricky, go ahead.
Is there a relationship between like direct cost to increase the gross product? Thinking about grazing management here in a 40-inch rainfall, a lot of the older neighbors, no fertility versus soil amendments. How much can we push it, and where is that tipping point to increase gross product? Is where I'm going. If you follow my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Does anybody else want to chip in on that?
No, other than I've been thinking about that a lot too, Ricky.
You lost me at 40 inches.
This guy doesn't even get enough rain to grow hair. Look at the two of them, Dad on the left, son on the right. Neither one of them get enough rainfall to grow hair. All right, the biggest thing, Ricky, I think you have to go through some scenarios there. And I think what often happens is we paint ourselves this rosy picture of how it's all going to go perfectly. Fertilizer, particularly in your environment, and Ricky lives in Northeast Oklahoma, so unirrigated. Sam, you're in Central Tennessee, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and again, you're not irrigating in your part of the world either, right?
No.
Okay. The problem I always have with things like fertilizer is what happens if it doesn't rain. If I'm under pivot and I've got reservoir water that I can be pretty confident fertilizing because I'm pretty sure I'm going to get production. Right? The thing about fertilizer is it can work, and it absolutely can work. And especially Ricky in your part of the world, and I think Sam, you guys too can use things like chicken litter that are relatively cheap, right? That can provide production increases. Yeah, maybe no, maybe yes. But it is easy to overspend on fertilizer. What can often work better is some combination of feeding and grazing management. The beautiful thing about buying feed and buying pasture is you're pretty assured that you're going to actually get it. And by buying pasture, I mean leasing it, right? When you buy feed, you're pretty certain that that's going to get into a cow. when you buy pasture, you have a pretty good assurance that you're going to get feed into your, lamb. Whereas when you fertilize, you're always banking on other things happening that need to happen correctly. That said, there is absolutely a place for it, and we've seen a number of cases where adding fertilizer increases production and changes the carrying capacity of the place. Right? Gives you a better ability to service your overheads. There's a guy in Texas I'm a huge fan of, runs one of the best hay businesses I have ever seen financially. And he fertilizes a lot. And he turns it into dollars. And it's a fantastic multiplier. But we have to always remember that fertilizer is like advertising dollars, right? There is not a one-to-one. Right? I can spend money on advertising and I might get more customers or I might not, right? If I'm the local microwave salesman, that could help, but there's risk tied to it. So I always want to make sure I weight that correctly with risk. In both of your countries where you guys are in small enough pastures, you guys could do a deal where maybe you do like you have a multi-year plan where over the course of 5 or 10 years, you get across the whole place. I don't know if something like that would work. And I don't know, like Ricky, where you are, if you fertilize on range, do you see an improvement for multiple years or is it a single year boost?
Well, the rangeland wouldn't respond as well to fertilizer as some of the improved or whatever.
Yeah.
If you call it improved or whatever, Bermuda and fescues. But there is a point. I almost feel like there is a one-to-one response from zero fertilizer.
Yeah.
There's a little point of one-to-one response, but then it kind of gets to diminishing returns, and the person just has to figure that out in his own environment.
Yep. The thing I worry about in your part of the world, and I don't know do you get army ants down there? No. Okay, south of you in East Texas, the guys that fertilized were like magnets for army ants. Southern Wyoming, if you fertilize, you get elk. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong, but it sucks. I hate elk, just for the record. My wife thinks they're the most wonderful, majestic creature they are. I can't stand them. But if you fertilize and the elk eat all your feed, that's a problem. If you fertilize in East Texas and get army ants, that's also a problem. So that if you don't have army ants and you don't have elk, and I know you don't have elk where you're at, then it could be the best of both worlds. Grow some really big rabbits. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's totally worth thinking about. Sam, your deal too. And that winter fescue that you guys have, there's room for improvement there sometimes, right?
Oh yeah.
Sam, where you're in a drought, it may not be very, if you had fertilized this year, it might not have paid anything, right?
No, and I'm mostly not thinking about nitrogen, just a lot of fields, despite, several years of great management, you can tell there's just something they need. And we're in the zero fertilizer category right now.
Yeah.
And nothing's changed, something they're missing something to get turned on. So.
Yep. Dale, you're kind of a fertilizer expert. What do you think? It adds production in your world, right? Where you irrigate? I don't know if you can hear me. Dale's in big hay country and used to do a lot of hay contracting, and I know is pro fertilizing. But that's in places where you have good mountain water, good snowpack. You can generate return from it. All right, other questions, comments, thoughts?
Are most of these grounds you guys are referencing monocrops, or do you strive for diversification within the pasture itself?
Ricky, Sam, don't all jump at once.
And we're in fescue country, but we're I guess because of the way we wrote, higher rest periods, we have pretty good diversity. Generally everything, even some of the we got some big blue and Indian and gamma in some spots, but it's fescue dominant. The fields I'm talking about are mostly like a lot of our ground's old hay fields, and it's just broom set, like low fertility species, and we've been mainly going with zero fertilizer and trying to supplement effectively, but I'm wondering if we need a little bit more sometimes. I was curious, John, back on the growth, did we use the opposite definition of gross margin ratio than what RFP, or did I just look at your slide wrong?
I hope I didn't. The intention was to be the same. How do you calculate it?
I thought it was gross margin over gross product, but I
Yes.
was just looking at
That was my intention.
I think
Generally,
it was-
it's a number less than 1.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get a number bigger than 1, usually you've done it backwards.
Yeah, unless it's yeah. Right.
Unless you get paid for inputs. Yes. Ricky, on your deal, in answer to Stan's question, you're kind of those improved pastures you're talking about are pretty heavy Bermuda grass, right? I mean, they'd be 90% plus of the production's coming out of Bermuda, right?
Well, it depends how much fertilizer you put to it. Yeah, it tends to be that way.
Yeah.
And there was some fescue in it, but also there's native patches around too that are basically used for hay. But at the same time, I like to try to interseed other legumes or grasses, multi-species in there. I get a better performance and better soil health.
And do you overseed cool seasons then into that Bermuda to get the best take, or do you put warm seasons in there too?
No, I've been putting in cereal ryegrass.
Yep.
With some hairy vetch and some others.
Yep. They do a lot of that in East Texas too, and it works. It grows a lot of feed in the wintertime. Cool. What else? Josh, more thoughts? Kian? Drew, glad you joined us.
I was just sitting here thinking, I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, yeah.
I was just sitting here thinking about when he was talking about interseeding and we've got some ground that we've talked about trying to graze some more diversity into. They're predominantly crested wheatgrass. The other species have been slowly slipping away. We've tried seeding mechanically into them, and it's just such an aggressive territorial plant.
Yep.
I'm wondering if we may be reduced to mechanical or chemical reduction.
What's your rainfall?
What are we, Dad? About 14?
12 to 14.
Which means that 9 out of 10 years you get 4, and the other ones you get 20.
Yeah, we had next year this year.
Yeah, good. You already had next year, huh? Well, my experience in Utah and Nevada, where we were sub 10 inches, we were usually 6 to 8 inches annual. Getting planted into crested was impossible without basically killing the crested. So at that time, this is 20 years ago, we were disking it, and still we were getting a huge component of crested that would come back, even after we put a 10,000 pound disc through it, and really turned it over. We would get a lot of crested to come back, but at least we would get the other stuff established and going, and then it could kind of hold the crested at bay if we grazed it right. And you had to be careful, because if on a dry year you grazed it too hard, that crested was incredibly competitive.
Well, it makes so much seed. I mean, I would imagine there was a massive seed bank in that stuff that you disked.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But again, it is so tough and so drought tolerant and so grazing tolerant that if you abused a pasture, you could get it back to crested pretty quickly.
Yeah. No, it's a nice plant. You enjoy it in the spring.
Yeah.
It's producing when nothing else is. It's about the only time of year you like cheatgrass as well. But The rest of the year, there's a lot of blank ground. The production is probably 40% of what it should be.
Yep, very true. For those of you that don't know, crested is an introduced Siberian grass. Very grazing tolerant, was seeded over a ton of federal range after fires, after, kind of the Dust Bowl period, after bad range management activities. It has been seeded over an incredible number of acres. It is very competitive. And when you find it, it's kind of like Bermuda when you fertilize it, where it's like 90% of what's there, and you'll find a few other things growing in it, but it tends to grow. It's basically a bunch grass. It'll grow in like a 4 to 6 inch clump, and then there'll be a 4 to 6 inch gap to the next one. And it seems like the taller you let it grow, the further spaced out it gets. So it, from a soil health and a soil armoring standpoint, not the best plant to have around, but it was planted largely because planted on a lot of winter range and planted on a lot of spring range in the West because, one, it was so grazing tolerant, and then, like Kian alluded to, it would start growing basically a month before a lot of natives would. So in Utah at 6,000 plus feet, we'd have green crested the 1st of April, whereas everything else was coming on middle of May, really. Except cheatgrass, which you mentioned, which is my favorite early season grass, but not everybody agrees with me on that.
Well, everybody loves it in March.
Oh, I love it in March. I agree. People in Wyoming don't like cheatgrass. They just think it's bad no matter what, but they're just not on it at the right time.
One quick one, or maybe not quick. Has there been a webinar? I mean, I see how it occurred to me how important the skill is of actually being to do an accurate inventory value.
Yes.
Has there been a webinar yet on just that topic? Like, for example, you look at your closest sale is what I usually do. I don't know about you guys, but I was looking at trying to do the end of year inventory value, and I was like, well, I don't know, that December sale or whatever, it's not that strong. Maybe I should use the second week in January, but I guess that's part of that income mindset that I realized, like, I really have to know what these things are worth all the time.
Yeah, and we have not done a webinar on that. We have alluded to it a few times. Chelsea talked about it just a little, I think, in her last one, her last inventory webinar. And we definitely can revisit that. We spend a lot of time talking with people about that, what that value is. And I agree with you. Late December is kind of a rough time to be valuing stuff. So is midsummer, right? You get July. Like, what are you going to do? There are 10 head that went through the local sale barn, and there was one buyer there, So there are those little times to avoid. But yeah, we can definitely talk more about that, Sam. I'll put that on the list of topics. That's a great one to bring up.
So what would you use? Because that would throw your whole year when you're looking at your annual report and you use a bad sale in December.
Yeah. I kind of fuzz my eyes on December, and it's like, here's where we were early December. Here's where I think we're going to be in January. We're going to pick a reasonable number.
Okay.
What exactly that means, it's pretty loosey-goosey. Wally, do you want to comment on that? I don't know if you got your microphone on.
Am I there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Suzanne. Well, there I am. I'm amazing myself. One thing on since I'm real big on don't let get your panties up your butt too much about inventory, and just you aren't going to sell them out. One thing I'm really starting to like about projections and stuff is using LRP, because that is a real number. You understand what I'm trying to say? And that's for projecting out quite a bit, but for coming up with your inventory values, just you were talking about midsummer. Well, if you take the weekend in the Rockies for your inventory number, shit down,
Suddenly everything looks better, right?
Oh man, but I think the deal on inventorying is just, granted, don't, do your ending inventory mid-December and forget about it. Go enjoy Christmas. stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. So that makes sense, Sam. So back up to those earlier December and assume that the number is not going to, now what was the year that we had BSE at like, was that the 21st of December or something?
23rd of December.
23rd. Yeah. Okay, good. Happens
but
to
the
also be
thing-
my wedding anniversary. So great,
but
a
the
great
thing-
day in the history of the world.
Yeah, but the one thing to think about on BSE, there's nothing you can do about it. And I truly believe that the BSE was announced by the government because the 23rd of December is the perfect day if you're going to announce something like that to do it.
Yep.
All the sale barns are closed down and all the checks have cleared. Everything is cleared out, and stuff.
And interestingly, and Bud was alive at that time, and he'd spent a lot of time talking about how much time you have when there is something bad like that happens. And in that period, it seemed like there was about a 30-day period. Now the holiday was in there too, so that's included. But January was not terribly badly affected by that. The impacts rolled out for a little while, but then it did kind of show up and then go away reasonably quickly. But again, excluding examples like that, Sam, I think taking a reasonable estimate, and again, we're always trying to be conservative. I would always rather add a little at the end than take away. But again, we're always remembering that we're talking about every animal. So when I sell on Superior, they're not all getting on that truck, right? And they're not all bringing top dollar. So we've got to sort of make sure we include all the good ones and all the ones that we're going to hold on to or that we're going to sell at the sale barn after we deliver.
Yeah. Okay.
Good, but we'll talk more about that. That's a great topic. I'm glad you bring that up. All right, awesome. What else?
But one thing, just since there's kind of a void in this conversation right now, well, one thing that's really got me interested in this is this morning I spent an hour with some people that are getting ready to go to EL, and doing projections, and stuff. And to me, doing projections, the LRP is a very good tool, I believe, to do projections with. And if you've got some money that you can make, just like for us on Stalker Group, John, last fall we LRP'd those cattle for not very much, and it has turned out very, very well for us.
Thank goodness we did it in October, right?
Yeah, but the thing was, the market was telling us they was willing to give us a great premium for not much great premium for not much premium. How's that for confusing?
A great price for not much premium. How about that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
And like right now, I worked through getting ready for the marketing school coming up next week. Right now, with the volatility that's been in the market, and the cost and the time frame that I'm going out, to me, there isn't much need to be using the LRP right now. But it does give you a base price on steers of $2 and I think it's 25 cents now. That is a real price if you use it, if you pay the premium.
Yep. I don't like that price as much as I like the price they got at Torrington a week ago. That was a lot better at 320 something or whatever it was. So
well, I realize that, but well, then go sell your doggone cattle, my friend.
I understand.
For your cattle business and what they got at Torrington doesn't really matter because you don't have any there.
They're not in Torrington. That's
They're
right.
not in Torrington.
But I could use that number on my inventory form and make everything look good. Convince my wife that we should do more of it.
If you're that poor manager, probably you should be doing that. Just put in the trucking to Torrington, and stuff.
Love it. Very good. All right, anything else, or should we wrap this party up?
I want to know what Wally thinks is undervalued right now.
Ah, great question.
Well, it depends on where you're at, and just like for right before the first of the year, there was in eastern Kansas, there was some cows that were really undervalued, and we bought 3 loads of them, and right now, and depending on where you're at, what's interesting right now is there is such a variance in the market, and some lightweight heifers are to me a good value, and if you've got some cows to sell, depending on where you're sitting at, you can trade one and buy back a heifer and make a bred heifer out of her pretty reasonable and stuff. But it depends on where you're at and stuff. And I haven't looked at the God, what is it? The bell ringer sale that they just had on Superior. There appeared to be some pretty good prices on that, especially for light cattle,
Yep.
and stuff.
But
So now that I've mumbled through that,
but it has been incredibly variable, because the same week they were selling $3,300 bred heifers in Torrington, you could buy $1,400 bred 4-year-olds in Kansas.
Yep.
Like those two markets had no relationship to one another.
Yep. That's right. And you need to look around, and stuff.
Yep.
And we're building, to me, we're building. If you watch the futures market is building, we're building, it is moving up, and stuff.
Yep. Rick, you've got Joy and Rick Stevens are on here. They're up in British Columbia, kind of, I guess, central British Columbia. Is that what you think of it as? You guys are, what were you seeing for undervalued stuff up there?
There's not a bunch right now. I know some of the older cows are going for pretty good price if you can pick around the edges and kind of get them for $2,000, but there's not enough lightweight cattle moving now to tell if there's any value on that, and everybody kind of get out of the heavy yearlings right about now before the spring board shows up. So
yeah, we looked at northeast of you guys. We looked at a market with another customer a couple weeks ago, and it looked like midweight heifers had like over $240 per pound value again. Like in that $575, $650 range. Kean, I still feel like heifers generally, I don't know, did Wally disappear? Where'd he go? There he is.
I'm still here.
Generally, midweight heifers are still, they just have not taken off. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they feel a little draggy. The steers, those midweight steers have picked up, and even some of the 6 to 7 weight heifers and steers before the first of the year couldn't hardly give them away. And now it feels like those ones have gained a good bit.
Yeah.
Since. But yeah, I keep waiting for these 5 to 6 weight calves to take off a little more, especially the heifers.
Yep. I think there have been an incredible number of people, I've repeated this a number of times, for I think the last 4 years, that have been saying, oh, bred heifers are going to take off. We need to buy heifers and breed them and have them for sale. And it continues to not happen. Who was I talking to earlier today? They were buying bred heifers in Iowa or Wisconsin for good quality ones for $1,500 a head.
Yeah, I think bred heifers feel like more of a liability at the moment up here.
Yep. Yeah, they were, I want to say they were 600 back of the feeder version. It's like, ooh, that's a really expensive shot of Ludel ice.
Yeah.
But the thing that's going to be interesting is there's always something undervalued. I mean, you just need to hunt it up and root it out and stuff. Man. Be patient.
As long as there is a market and animals are moving, something will be overvalued and something will be under.
You know, let me tell
It
you
takes
one
two.
back to the BSE deal, whenever it was, and thank God Bud was still alive, you know, and
2001, 2002.
I don't know, it's a while ago and
Yeah.
stuff. But one thing you need to like Bud drilled through me is because I kind of locked up, you know, I had a number of cattle for some unbeknownst reason. I had hedged a lot of cattle that fall, you know, and I had like, you know, on just January the 8th or something, I can't remember. I had like $68,000 in my hedge account because they went down that much, you know. And like Bud said, as soon as there is a market, you understand what? And as soon as you can do relationships, you understand what I'm saying? You start marketing again, you know. And you know, if I would have heeded, you know, because I could have, you know, got out of those contracts, picked up that $68,000, and by summer when I sold the cattle, they were back up or higher than they were.
Yep. 2003, December
he was-
23rd, 2003.
Yeah, he was working with Simplots, you know, and Simplots locked up, you know, and wouldn't buy any feeder cattle, you know, and he was saying you need to, you know, they're so undervalued because there's a market now, you know.
Yep.
And they still wouldn't do it, you know. So as soon as there's a market, you start marketing and stuff.
The biggest problem in my mind that came out of the pandemic was when we had, you know, basically lots of markets closed. You literally couldn't get stuff sold there for a little while.
That's right.
That is the worst case. Volatility is our friend. No market is the biggest problem.
Yep. And you know, and then you also, so you have to always be getting time in your organization. So you just bump over that little bump in the road.
Yep. Yep. And time is measured in pounds, and it's measured in cash in the bank, and it's measured in grass in the pasture, feed in the bin, all those things. Those are all correlated with being able to buy yourself time.
That's correct. Well, and always be building time. And if you're an old fart like me, you're about out of time. So,
Tell you what, speaking of that, we've been talking a lot about time at our house lately. We have a good friend who's on her second round of cancer, you know, and this first round they got it taken care of, kind of similar to Rebecca's deal. And 2 years later, it came back, metastasized brain, spine, liver,
just bad.
A whole bunch of places, right? Beautiful 35-year-old woman, 5 kids, you know, just a nice, the worst possible person it could happen to. And she is a good example of, at some point, the jig's up.
Yep.
And we all need to be a little prepared for that.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, on that note,
are you, Haskell?
What'd you say?
I said, are you?
Am I what?
Prepared?
No, not nearly enough.
And stuff. So.
Not nearly enough. I don't know that you can be prepared enough for that.
Like, I mean, you can't be prepared enough because it changes, you know, and you just got, you know, just got to be sort of prepared.
Yep.
Instead.
Well, we're definitely in the sorta category. I'd like to be more sorta. How does that sound?
Understand.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap this up. Great to see you guys. Thank you very much for coming. It's always a pleasure. And we'll do it again in a month, 3rd Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Mountain. We will talk more about gross product. Great. See you later. Thank you.
Have you got a moment, Haskell?
I do indeed.
Thank you, John.
What